Much of the commentary world has decided and struck you as a genius, Dan, for the 12-man penalty and declared that it was intentional. Was it indeed intentional to induce the throw one-on-one against Jabbar in that spot?
It wasn't one-on-one. We actually had a safety on top. So there was so it's called dog. It's when you play, but he wasn't in extremely tight coverage, but he was in dog coverage where he had safety on top of him. And, there was a timeout before that. We spent an inordinate amount of time on situations. There's some situations that don't show up very often in college football, but this is one that obviously was something that we had worked on. So you can see the result.
But when I say that Dan Lanning is changing college football, I'm not being sarcastic. I'm almost laughing because this is the most hilariously awesome thing an Oregon coach has ever done. So Pete Nakos reporting, who I have an objection to in just a moment, that the NCAA is actively engaged in making an in-season action after Lanning took advantage of the 12 men on the field loophole. I will emphasize here, Oregon did not violate a rule. They had 12 men on the field and they were flagged for it. And there was a risk that was taken with that, which I'll get to in just a second. But because Dan Lanning then went to his presser, now the NCAA was certainly going to take a look at this either way, because a lot of people had figured out, hey, I think Oregon did this 12-man thing on purpose. Lanning then, in his Monday press conference, is holding back a smile. This might be the greatest Lanning moment ever. That this is how he beat Ohio State to get his signature win is just phenomenal. It's just phenomenal. So he's asked about it in his presser, and he says there are a lot, I'm paraphrasing here, well, there are a lot of unique situations, and that was one of them. And everyone was like, oh, wait a minute. So this was on purpose? Now, I understand, and if you asked me to vote, I would vote yes on changing this rule. However, because no, you should not be able to put an extra guy on the field and just burn clock in that situation. But guess what? Lanning was not doing anything wrong. The officials handled the play correctly. Now, what I object to with Pete Nakos' piece here in his second article over at on3.com, which you can go read, he says NCAA rules currently do not require the clock to be reset after a 12-man penalty is called. The NCAA is now evaluating in-season action after the controversial call impacted Oregon's win over Ohio State. What is controversial about this? It's brilliant. This isn't a controversy. This isn't, well, did they handle it correctly? Oh, and then later in the piece, he does say the Big Ten crew officiating the game did handle the play correctly, a source said. Yeah, they did. But Dan Lanning, being such a sicko, such a Mad Hatter in the lab genius, to go out and have this on hand to say, hey, wait, let's call a timeout. We worked on this. We're going to put 12 guys on the field. They're not going to be able to get a big play. And we're going to run off 4 seconds of the clock. And then Will Howard, we know what happened from there. This is the greatest thing that Dan Lanning has ever done. It is as hilarious as it is brilliant. And it is absolutely within the grounds of legal college football action. This is not cheating. I don't even think this is dirty. This is just being smart. John Canzano wrote, and I think accurately, it's not as any bit as dirty as Ohio State rushing up to the line to get the snap off before the replay review can buzz down and say, hey, that's an interception. That's what the rule is. If you're playing the game the way the rule's written and you want to change the rule, if you want to change the rule, that's okay. But this is done within the structure of a completely legal framework. And might I add, to have thought of this, you have to think about football every day. I mean, I've never even heard of this. This is some Belichick stuff. It truly is, because he found a loophole in the rules to run out the clock one time on Monday Night Football against the Jets. And one of you sent me a message that Mike Vrabel did the same thing to Bill Belichick a couple of years ago, and the NFL changed the rules. It's not a dirty move by the coach. It's just being smart and taking advantage of the way the rules are written and playing within the confines and restrictions of those rules. And by the way, Oregon was flagged. And Oregon did have to give up 5 yards, but they were willing to give up 5 yards in exchange for 4 to 5 seconds going off the clock. They got 4 off, and every single second counted there. So that's the first thing. Like, this is just... It's too funny to be true, but it's completely legitimate. Now, on the flip side, for those that would take a negative angle of this, there is 100% a risk involved. Let's say, for instance, on that play where Oregon puts a 12th man on the field. I still can't believe that's real. It's just so awesome. That Oregon puts a 12th man on the field and Will Howard throws away from the crowd and towards Jabbar Muhammad as he did, who comes up and makes a dynamite play defensively and just swats the ball down. What if he had intercepted that ball? If he intercepts that ball, 12 men on the field, game is not over. Dan Lanning is buffoon rather than genius. And he would never indicate that they did it intentionally, and he'd have some cover for that. And it would just be, yeah, we made a substitution mistake. Guy went on the field, he wasn't supposed to. That's on me and the coaching staff. That's what it would have been. But there was risk involved there, and it absolutely paid off. I don't know why the word controversial is in Pete Nakos' piece here. Like, you did something that is legal and brilliant. That's like saying, well, that controversial RPO offense. Like, what do you mean controversial? Well, no one's done it before. Okay, that doesn't make it controversial. That makes it new. That makes it different. That makes it a strategy. It doesn't make it controversial. So I don't think that's the correct interpretation. But the exact quote from Lanning, by the way, again in this piece from Pete Nakos of On3, quote, "We spend an inordinate amount of time on situations, and some situations don't come up very often in college football, but this was obviously something we had worked on. You can see the result." That's so good. That is so phenomenally good. And do I think that it is wise to change the rule? Yeah, because I wouldn't want other teams to have done this to Oregon, because I'd say there's a brilliant strategic move. Wait, why is the rule written that way? Wait, why is it? But the rule is written that way. And after Oregon did it successfully, I wouldn't want someone else to be able to do it to Oregon. So Dan Lanning is forcing rule changes in college football because he sits in a lab and somehow between recruiting and game planning and raising 3 kids, man, he found a way to realize, hey, if we are trying to kill clock and we can give up a few yards but don't want to give up a lot, what if we put a 12th man on the field? Clock's not going to run. It's a fault to the NCAA, not a fault to Dan Lanning. In fact, it's a credit to Dan Lanning. That is some crazy, detail-oriented, sicko behavior, and I'm so here for it.
Ohio State and Oregon, which was everything it could have possibly been built up to be, 2 gigantic teams, powerful national championship worthy teams who at times certainly had some flaws and fits and starts here and there, but a tremendous 1-point game complete with field storming led by Phil Dunphy at the end, which was really cool. He and Kenyon Barner, the former Duck, leading the charge onto the field to celebrate the victory against Ohio State. And I want to talk about the last drive, the clock management, and the 12 men on the field. First of all, now, Pete, you may have done some investigation on this. Let's start at the end and work backwards. Did Oregon, have you been able to find out, did Oregon purposely send the 12th defender? And I imagine everybody listening to this podcast follows things pretty closely, but in the event that maybe you're not totally familiar with what we're talking about, Ohio State's last opportunity, there are 10 seconds after the timeout. I'm looking at the play-by-play here. Oregon has 12 men on the field defensively. Okay, the idea in that is if it were done purposely, is to limit the big play because you're a little bit out of field goal range, and a 5-yard penalty still won't put you in field goal range because the ball was spotted at that time at the 43-yard line. There's an incomplete pass thrown, takes 6 seconds off the clock, or 4 seconds off the clock, meaning 6 seconds are remaining, if I've confused you enough on this. So they've run a play, did Ohio State, against an Oregon defense that had 12 men on the field. Many believe purposely 12 men on the field, an extra defender to limit the big play, with the full knowledge that this is only a 5-yard penalty. So you get the time run off the clock with the incomplete pass, which drained the clock down to 6 seconds, flag, 5-yard penalty, move it to the 38, still out of what they deem to be makeable field goal range, and now you've left them basically with one play. So that's how it ended. Pete, have you been able to find out, did Lanning do this on purpose, or was it a serendipitous turn of events that everyone is saying was on purpose?
My understanding was that it was serendipitous. Did anyone in the post game say specifically they thought it was on purpose?
I don't. Everybody's been speculating about that online, but my understanding is that Dan was not asked in the post game about it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I did not dig anything yesterday that would have revealed that. You got to be pretty diabolical in that moment to do that. Like, you've got to be pretty diabolical to do that. Not that they couldn't be there, but that would surprise me. That would surprise me.
It would also have to be really specific to that circumstance, because
Yes.
if say the play only, let's say for whatever reason, the play had only taken you down to 8 seconds,
Right.
then on the following play that has gained so much attention, then he gets down, then he stops the clock, and then you have the chance for the field goal. So it has to be a really specific.
Is it an additive penalty, Reese? So say they gained 12 yards on a pass.
It's no play. Well, then in that case, you could have just declined it.
You just decline. Okay, so it's not like it wouldn't be. Yeah. Okay.
Did you see? If you grew up with a dad who was a field judge, literally, and now that we watch games together, as soon as the field takes place, Dad does this. If you're watching on YouTube, he's counting. I mean, he cannot, and he always said you can actually sense it. You counted it so many times, you'll out here, even if there's only one extra person. But no, to that point, what my father has always said, especially as we move into this era of, everybody's slowing everyone down with these incredibly horrible fake injuries. Your daughter, Reese, by the way, could make a living coaching these guys on how to at least act like they're actually hurt. But if you're looking for ways to slow the game down, it's not a bad idea. Like my dad has said this several times. He said, that's an easy air quote mistake to make. That's 5 yards, doesn't really cost you much, maybe buys you a little time, certainly stops the clock for a second. And so, no, it's now it's out there, and any coaches, and I'm sure they're all 130 or whatever want to listen to us. Just so y'all know, that's going to be hard to enforce, kind of like these fake injuries. So I've always wondered why that didn't happen more often.
So I guess if you're the 40-yard line and beyond, maybe 42 and beyond, because if that ever backfired and you got nudged to the field goal range, you'd be roasted to eternity. You'd be Billy Napier, for example.
Picking the perfect spot is the most difficult part of it. But
which is why I have a hard time, like, situationally, that has to come up in this way, like, once a decade, right? Maybe end of half.
Look, they were working off a timeout, so I'm not going to dismiss it entirely.
Okay.
The one thing I would say about it, and we need to probably get to the slide. The one thing I would say about this is that if that is, maybe that needs to be looked at as a loophole in the rule book. And maybe 12-man participation becomes a bigger penalty.
Yeah.
It becomes, or I even brought up, I'm sure there's some loopholes in this. My son and I were talking about this yesterday, because he said his idea was like, okay, what if you did this? What if instead of a 10-second runoff, they gave you 10 seconds back? And I said, I don't know if that would work, but you know what? An untimed down. If you get like inside the last minute of the game and you have something like that against you, the offense then gets one untimed down, and then the clock starts at the end of that play as it would normally. If you get out of bounds, it doesn't stop. If you're tackled in play, it starts as soon as the play's ended. That's probably way too complex, probably the thing you do is just make the penalty more yardage, for that participation. Will
Or you
Howard,
just wind the clock back to when the play started.
maybe you could do that too. That's also a fair assessment
Because
of it.
because the one thing everyone loves more than the official coming in after the guy had one toe over the line, Reese, is the official coming in and adding to have time, asking to have time added to the clock. It's
true.
Everybody loves that too.
Oregon fans are quick to point out, and they're not wrong, that on our first drive of the game, that should have been an interception. Absolutely, unequivocally should have been an interception. Kazmarek never had control of that ball.
No, he didn't.
It never hit the ground, and the other guy came up with it. That should have been an interception. I'm very surprised they didn't review it. Just the end of the game sequence was complete, utter trash from both the officials and the Ohio State coaching staff.
Oh, I know Matt Finkes can be controversial, but he did get clarification on the college football rule about that. So the rule was changed in 2013 to the current rule, which is a dead ball 5-yard penalty when 12 players line up in a defensive formation, and a 15-yard penalty for participation. The 15-yard participation was eliminated. That said, the play should have been blown dead on the snap, according to the officials, similar to an offensive offsides penalty. The yards should have been assessed, and 10 seconds should have remained on the clock at the snap.
I think this was an illegal substitution, which is different than too many men on the field, and that should have had it blown dead. But there's some conspiracy theories going on out there that, I don't know if conspiracy theory is the right word, but that Dan Lanning knew what he was doing with that. Like, we'll never know. I mean, he certainly told that guy to get on the field, but it might be because he thought they were short players and not because he knew what he was doing and that, the clock was going to run and everything else like that. I mean, if Finkes' interpretation of the rule is correct, then I would argue Lanning was not doing that. But, let's talk about the sequence at the end of the game. I mean, the last play of the game, I've got it on pretty good authority that that's not what they repped and that's not what they game planned. Chip called that. I didn't understand why he called a flood pattern on the sideline. We still had a timeout. It's not like we needed to get out of bounds. That's a long developing play. My understanding is that they repped, quick slants, get the yardage in the middle of the field, call the timeout. And for whatever reason, Chip didn't call that. And my understanding is that Ryan was beyond furious with Chip in the locker room in front of the team. Like, he was irate.
I realize that this pisses off Washington fans because they're 3-0 against him so far. But what he did against against Ohio State was pretty spectacular. So for those who don't know, what Dan Lanning did is he put 12 people on. He calls timeout. This is as the game is winding down. And Ohio State is getting close to an attempt at what would be a game-winning field goal. Oregon's up 1 point here. Dan Lanning calls timeout, puts 12 men on the field, knowing he's going to get called for it. But the play takes seconds off the clock. And so he's happy for that to give up those yards for the 12 men on the field to take the seconds off the clock. Now, if you don't know your history, you've not seen this before, but this is what Buddy Ryan did when he was the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. He called it the Polish goal line. He put 14 players in on the goal line, knowing they would call it to shorten the game. He essentially wanted to make it where the opponent only had one play left. Because remember, a defensive penalty, you can't end on a defensive penalty. So basically ran the clock out and made it where the opponent had one play left. And if you stop that play, you win. And that is kind of where Dan Lanning went with this one. And it was brilliant. One more Buddy Ryan thing. He actually did it with a punt at one point also. Put 14 men on the punt team. The officials didn't see it and didn't call it. Buddy Ryan got asked about it after the game. They're like, do you think you shouldn't have done that? And he's like, no, I should have put 15 out there.
Yeah. So the thing that I'll say is that it's a very savvy call, right? Like to have the frame of reference to know your situation in the game, what you'll want to do in order to shorten that game, and then also having worked and repped that in practice enough to run it efficiently, right? Like they did that intentionally and it helped them win. And I think that it is an interesting viewpoint because Ohio State during the same period of time was 100% rattled by the clock. So like on one hand, you have a coach who has not only done something in the game that is clever, but has envisioned this scenario and worked on it in practice so that his players were aware of what to do and how to execute that plan when the game was on the line. We're talking just mere seconds left, right? And on the other hand, you have a coach who was surprised by the clock restarting and them scrambling and then eventually running the game out with Will Howard sliding with the time expiring. So like that to me, like of all the criticisms that you want to have of Ryan Day, I think that's probably where I would go first. But also Dan Lanning being a genius because, of course, that's the perfect call. Now, if you have a senior quarterback like Will Howard who recognizes what's being done, I can't imagine. Like I always marvel, Andy, at how quickly people count all the players because every time I try to do it, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Like how quickly can a quarterback like acknowledge or understand or feel that there are 12 men on the field? Because if Howard were to spike the ball,
think about if you do things over and over again and everything looks the same way, like that 12th person is going to stick out like a sore thumb. That's why the quarterbacks and the free safeties, who are usually the ones responsible for noticing those things, like they notice them immediately. And there's somebody on the sidelines that's counting, and remember the back judge is also counting the defense.
So how much percent do you put on, like it's a smart play, but what if Will Howard would have spiked the ball? Like if you would have recognized that there are 12, if there were 12 men on the field, spike the ball, take the 5 yards, then move on from there, because they're probably when you regardless of where they were on the field, they were probably in a position where it would have made it a field goal attempt. It might have been a really long one, but there was a risk to that. It wasn't just like we're going to put 12 men out there, we're going to stop a play from happening, and we're going to waste time. It worked perfectly, but if the other team recognizes what you're doing, they can also spike the ball, stop the clock, reset the play clock, take the 5 yards, and do it again. So like that, there is a risk to it, but Ohio State was not in a position, both in what they were doing and what Oregon was doing, to acknowledge that, or not acknowledge it, to recognize that and take it as a benefit. It hurt them.
Yeah, All In says, is it cheating if it's in the rules? Should probably be changed. It's not cheating because it's using the rules to your advantage. Now, is there a way to close the loophole? Maybe. I would need this. We need to ask somebody who I'll check with our guy John McDade, who's the SEC coordinator of officials, because I'm curious. Because usually when you come up with a solution for this, somebody who's been an actual official will go, well, you can't do that because the other team will then do this. And my question is, is it possible to even change the rules in this way where when the defense does this, it stops the clock, or you go back to the original time on the clock before the play was run? Like the offense, you don't let the offense do that, because obviously the offense would just use that to run out the clock. But could you do that? I don't know if that's something that you could use to close the loophole, because remember, Buddy Ryan did this 30 years ago, and they never changed the rules in the NFL.
Well, here's the point, Andy, and I think Connor here in the chat said it best. This is the entire point we're trying to make. It doesn't matter if the situation had to be right, to have the composure to make the call as a coach at that point in the game, ice in the veins. Like, I think that is the takeaway.
I agree completely. Because you can look like a moron. Like, remember, and now Derek Dooley didn't put 13 guys, and it was his defensive coordinator, didn't put 13 guys on the field on purpose against LSU in 2010. And they ended up looking terrible from that. Well, we'll have to ask our guy T-Bob Hebert about that, because he was playing in that game. He was the center on that play. But you can also look like a clown. Like, what if Ohio State had scored on the play with 12 men on the field? Like, here's my question. Shouldn't he have put 14 men on the field, or 15?
Yeah. Like the 12
shouldn't he have done that?
Yeah, it doesn't guarantee you to get a stop. I mean, I think it probably certainly helps. But
It helps a lot, but yeah.
receivers, with Ohio State's receivers, I guess I wouldn't put it past them to getting a first down or moving the ball. The thing that is so interesting to me is that Ohio State did have the ball inside the 30, down by 1, with enough time left to at least try to run the ball, call timeout, and attempt a field goal. Now, the offensive pass interference, if you want to get bent out of shape about that, go ahead. But Ohio State got away with an interception touchdown scenario earlier in the game that we don't talk about. So, I don't really get wound up on coaching or ref calls. But I think that the main takeaway here is that Dan Lanning, again, ice and veins, and worked on something, and Ohio State was running around with chickens with their heads cut off at the end of the game. Yeah, this is Andy, I know we're probably not supposed to react to this stuff, but okay. Comments like this. Glazing Dan Lanning, boy, this is going to get old real fast. Why wouldn't we compliment a guy who just won a top 5 game against Ohio State at home for the first time? What do you want out of the show?
They don't want us to say anything nice about anybody except their team. And then it's not everybody. That's a certain kind of person. A certain kind of person thinks if you say something nice about one person, it means you think every other person on earth sucks. It's sort of the ethos of the internet.
There couldn't be a more appropriate time to discuss Dan Lanning. It's bizarre. Yeah. Okay. The thing that I love about really high level coaching is when you are playing a game against a team and you do things that the other team couldn't foresee, right? Like you have special packages, or you have a ace in your sleeve that you work on in practice every day. He didn't just come up with this on the sideline, tap someone on the ass and say, go into the football game. This is a situational thing that they repped in practice.
Yeah, they've clearly prepped for this. So, as Farrah says in the chat, Ohio State could have made a play and declined the penalty. Too much risk. That's why I say put 15 on the field. Because yes, with 12 players, when Emeka Egbuka and Jeremiah Smith are 2 of the receivers on the field, you actually still may get burned with 12 players. You probably need 15. But that's the only quibble I have. Otherwise, genius.
No, there's no reason to quibble because it worked, right? He knew the situation. He did something that worked. You can always go, well, what if somebody would have done this or somebody done that? The only thing you can analyze is, did the thing that you tried to do work? That's coaching, right? So, listen, I think that this guy is, not to keep blowing smoke up everyone, is one of the best coaches in college football in rising in the sport. I think that in 3 to 5 years, if not next year, we will consider him on the pantheon of the greats in the sport. And I think I would probably, venture to put him in my top 4 if I did a coaching
Those
list.
Ducks played their best game of the year. Well done, Oregon. And everybody involved, by the way. The atmosphere was tremendous. I thought Ohio State traveled well, which they should and do. And then the game lived up to the billing. Let's talk really quickly about the ending sequence of that game. There was a lot going on. First and foremost, Ohio State drives down the field. And the first thing that happens is they drive it all the way down to the 28-yard line. All right. So at one point on the last series of the game, there's 34 seconds left. It's 1st and 10 from the 28-yard line. They are in field goal range. They have to feel like they have a field goal, points, a win in their back pocket. So at this point, you're just thinking to yourself okay, we're not putting the ball in a precarious spot. I wouldn't have minded a run play at that moment and force Oregon to start taking their timeouts so that, you can just end the game with the field goal and leave them no time. That wouldn't have been terrible. But at the 28-yard line, you're still talking about a 45-yard field goal. So this is college. You still are going to want more room. You want to get closer. So they throw an incompletion. Now it's 28 seconds. It's 2nd and 10. And now the play happens that I think cost Ohio State the game. You feel like you're probably 82% going to win the game at that point. That's about the percentage that you would think from 43. Maybe you get a few more yards, you up that percentage. And they're just trying to throw the ball to Jeremiah Smith on the short side of the field. And lo and behold, they call an offensive pass interference. I was shocked watching the game that they called the offensive pass interference. I talk with officials all the time. And generally speaking, here's what it comes down to. For offensive pass interference, they want to see a clear extension. All right. They want to see the arm clearly extend in order to gain separation. Now, was there contact between Jeremiah Smith and the corner? Yes. And was it physical? Yes. There's no doubt. Now, on the film, all night it had been physical. And in fact, the play previous, Jeremiah Smith is being held the entire time he's trying to run a corner route. Like, it was a physical game. And they had let them play for the most part throughout the entirety of the game. And then all of a sudden the corner squats. Jeremiah Smith is running his route and contacts the corner and then breaks out. Doesn't extend. Again, he doesn't push off in order to create the space, and the flag comes out. I thought it was a bad call. Just kind of point blank. And I would say that for anybody. Why? Because based on my conversations with officials, he didn't extend. He doesn't push. All right. Is there contact? Yes. Is there contact on every play before that? Yes. So the fact that the flag comes out there, I thought was, it was a poor call. It was a poor call. Now, having said that, this is where it gets dicey for Ohio State because of what I'm about to tell you. The play ends up in bounds. It's a completion. And so the clock is running. I would love to know what Will Howard was hearing in the headset, because obviously we have coach-to-player communication now, and Chip Kelly is talking to him in the headset. And it looked like to me that Will was screaming at everybody like, come on, let's go, let's go. And you can kind of see him, and his hands are going like this. And again, this is on the play, not before the run, but after the offensive pass interference, when time is ticking down and down and down, and they're losing valuable time. I wouldn't have minded seeing them take a timeout at that point, just because it's like the time might be more valuable at that moment. Now, you can argue with me on that, and that's totally fine. But now you get to the last couple of snaps, and there's 10 seconds to go, and all of a sudden Oregon takes a timeout. And now Oregon, after the timeout, they come out onto the field, they run a defensive lineman off the field, and then all of a sudden late, like really late, right before the snap, a corner just steps on the field in order to play. The way that the film looks, it's hard for me to think that it was anything other than completely brilliant strategy from Dan Lanning in Oregon. I don't think it was a mistake from Oregon. They put the 12th player out there in order for the snap not to count and to take extra time off the clock.
Anything can, does, and will happen in college football any given Saturday. And the big one last Saturday, of course, was in Eugene, the top 3 showdown between Ohio State and Oregon. Not 5, not 6, 7 lead changes in this one. It was such a great game. In the end, time literally runs out on Ohio State. Some interesting clock management, maybe some clock miscues, maybe some clock manipulation planning as well. As the Buckeyes, they got the ball back, $1:47 to go, down 1, drive the field. There's that questionable offensive pass interference called on Jeremiah Smith, where
highly questionable.
Yes, there was maybe a smidge of extension, but it
was a physical route.
Yeah, and physical game, by the way. Took the Buck
in a physical coverage by the DB
from the 28 back to the 43. So that moved them out of field goal range. And then a penalty was called with 22 seconds left on Oregon. The big thing, the clock started once the ball was spotted. I think a lot of people out there, and maybe in a tight moment, you guys can handle this better, would say, oh, it's a penalty. Naturally, the clock stops because the referee's talking to us. It's telling us what happens. The ball's down. But there was a bit of a laissez-faire attitude to get the ball snapped. They didn't snap it till 15 seconds left. And then with 6 seconds left, 3rd and 25 from the Oregon 23, Will Howard looking for a quick play and runs and slides. And not enough time to call the timeout. So time expired while our boy Will Howard was sliding. So,
I mean, I've said this before, and Greg Schiano was on my staff. Obviously, I think one of the best coaches in college football, and many do what he's done at Rutgers. But he was an extremist as far as covering every situation. I was not, and people were shocked that I I don't believe in paralyzing players, and I don't mean that. I mean, I don't believe in slowing players down. I want players to play hard and fast. That wins. However, you do spend every day in training camp, the last half of spring ball, every practice. I think everyone does this. They finish with some kind of scenario, and I would keep a track. And I actually had a staff, an analytics guy, help me with that. Hey, give me a situation. Give me a situation. Give me a situation. I'm not sure I've ever seen that one. You know, the pass interference, the live ball. Now that's a live ball where that means you start on the wind.
Yeah.
And that is a completely different animal than when the official does this.
Yeah.
If the official does this, then it's on the snap. And when you start losing 7 seconds, you know, I mean, my heart was racing. Obviously, I'm a Buckeye fan, but I'm a college football fan as well, trying to figure out, I mean, how fast things change. And then Mark and Rob, the difference between that game, it's 60 minutes of football, Mark. It's that far.
Yep.
You know, if he slides that much quicker, they get the timeout. They line up and pop a field goal and get out of Eugene, Oregon, with one of the great wins for Ohio State. That far, and I'm not talking about the field goal. If he slides that much earlier, because actually, as he's going down, there's 1 second on the clock. So
you gotta.
And if you had one extra second on the clock, right, from hurrying up that snap at that moment that you're talking about as well.
But just to piggyback on what Coach says, like I've played a lot of football, like 12 years in the league, you know, 3 years in the NFL. 3 years in college. Like I played for some great Hall of Fame coaches, and we worked situation after situation after situation. You have a period of situations every day after practice, working a situation, and I've never think that we ever worked that situation, Coach. Like,
no, I know.
For Dan Lanning to be able to intentionally have that situation ready and his players prepared for it, that's chess and not checkers.
So
like,
here's what you're talking
that
about.
dude.
Yeah, Mark, I want to get to this quote real quick because there was some chatter on our text chain after the game. Like, do you think this was an on purpose 12-man penalty by Oregon because it would only move it, 5 yards, I believe, but it would run some time off the clock. And at that point, the clock was the priority. So here is Dan Lanning after the win addressing that, what looks like to be right now an intentional penalty. Sly little smile through the course of that interview. By the way, Phil Knight and, you know, the board of trustees are going down to the coach's office right now. Like, hey, let's extend this thing a little bit.
Yes.
That is, like you said, some are playing checkers, some are playing chess, Mark.
Yes. He's playing chess, and for him to be aware of that situation in that moment, it's one thing to practice situation, but to be able to execute it in a game of that magnitude, when it's that much pressure, and still just have the wherewithal and the cojones to still execute the situation. That's huge.
Let me say this about that situation is, if that's true, if he did that, and he's a friend of mine, and I'm not going to ask him now because I don't want to know. But after,
what do you mean you don't want to know?
I guess I do want to know, but
I want to know. Ask for me then.
If that's true, then for 38 years of my career, I've been playing checkers.
Yep, and a lot of coaches
I've never done
coach.
that. I never even. I'll be honest. That's never even crossed my mind.
You're conceding 5 really important yards at a critical time that almost gets you into field goal range
at the perfect moment.
And I'm just trying to think over the headset. Mark, you know how nuts it is?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
The sideline is chaos. And they said, all right, I mean, you have Jeremiah Smith, you have a Mecca, you got, I mean, they're 12 yards away from kicking a game-winning field goal, and we're going to give them 5 more yards. And someone says, hey, run the timeout or run the 12-man play. I'm like going, wait, what in the?
Yes.
So they did have They did have a timeout.
Guy,
remember, there was a timeout where they got together and they discussed it, right? So like there was a breath. You know,
That's
it wasn't
crazy.
It wasn't everything just kind of spinning, but that is insanity.
Coach, I played for some sticklers with situations. Sean Payton was a stickler for situations.
Saban and John Harbaugh.
Saban.
Think of who you played for.
Yes, Harbaugh too. Like stickler for situations, man. Like, and I never heard of that situation.
Have you ever heard a coach, Mark, and this is big, say, let's practice intentionally taking a penalty in those? I never thought of that.
We've practiced intentionally doing things, but not intentionally 12 men on the field to give up 5 yards and run off 8 seconds off the clock in a crucial moment And to be able to remember, like you said, Coach, like to be able to remember that all that craziness and chaos going on, and you remember to call that, like, and to do it, and to execute it to perfection.
I will say this, Rob. I did go out. I was asked to go out to Eugene in the spring, speak to the team, speak at the clinic, spend time with them. I spent time with the offensive staff. If that is, they are playing checkers.
Yeah.
I mean, that is
Chess.
Chess, because that is a hell of a staff.
They might be playing a game that hasn't even been invented yet.
Yeah.
Forget about
it's
chess
bigger than
and
chess.
checkers.
Solitary
This
or
is some
something.
crazy game they're crafting in Eugene that nobody knows about right now.
So hats off if they did it and it worked. And obviously that rule will get revisited because really that should be dead.
So apparently now the NCAA is looking to fix the loophole that Dan Lanning in Oregon took advantage of against Ohio State late in their game last weekend. If you've been living under a rock and you didn't see it, Oregon put a 12th defender onto the field literally with seconds to go in the game. And even though the penalty was called, the time did not get put back on the clock, which was what Ohio State needed the most. Now, there are two buckets that I think we need to discuss here. The first is how to fix it, and it's actually pretty simple. One option is when there's 2 minutes or less left on the clock in the game, if there is a pre-snap penalty by the defense, you assess the penalty yardage and put the time lost back on the clock at the snap. Or you give the coach the ability to choose either. Do you want the 5-yard penalty, or do you want us to put the time at the snap back on the clock? Another option is when the referee recognizes that there are 12 men on the field defensively, the play is instantly blown dead, like when the offense false starts or the defense jumps off sides and they're unabated to the quarterback. All of those options could fix the problem. The second bucket is, what does this make Dan Lanning? Does it make him smart or a cheater? Well, to me, the answer is it makes him smart as hell. Just like Trump told Hillary about taxes in the debate, I use the loopholes because I'm smart. And if you don't like it, then fix the loopholes. You're in charge. Most rules in sports are built to help the offenses. So defensive coaches have to do mental gymnastics to find ways to gain an advantage. The fact that Oregon actually practiced this shows you how deep Dan Lanning and most coaches at this level get into wargaming scenarios in game. There is no stone left unturned. I'm sure this is something they worked on, situational periods at the end of the game week and some during the spring. So don't hate the player, hate the game. And Lanning isn't an evil genius, just a genius with an evil grin. David Cohn, he's got a nice grin. I wouldn't call it evil. Former Michigan quarterback, that could be considered evil by some people in the Ohio State part of the country. But my brother, former Western State, Colorado wide receiver, Blaine Crane, 100% evil. David, your thoughts on one, do you deep down, I know that, and we have the clip. David, what do you think about him doing that? I believe he did it on purpose now.
You think so?
I think he did. But again, if there's a loophole and I take advantage of it, that's just me being smart.
Man, this thing is just layered like an onion. First off, there's this group of people that say, oh, yeah, of course he takes credit for it after the fact, right? Like, that's the smart move, is just taking credit for it. But you can see that the players running out there, they want to be penalized, which to me does show that they practice it in some form or another. And then you have this faction of people, mostly Buckeyes fans right now, who say, oh, that's cheater, that's a low, dirty move. But what's interesting about it is you're not running an extra defender out there to try and gain an advantage from that standpoint. You're running an extra defender out there so you can be penalized. You want the penalty. You want to be penalized for the action you're taking so it takes the seconds off the clock. So to your point, yeah, like if it either needs to be blown dead beforehand so those seconds don't come off the clock, or you need to be able to give the offense some sort of option. I don't know. I mean, we implemented something into the game where you have a 10-second runoff of the clock. Clearly, you can make a rule that does this. So if a new rule comes out because of this that Dan Lanning has done, then yeah, you got to call him a genius. But here's one thing that I think that we should talk about. And that is, if you're going to do this and the referees are not going to give you, or they are going to give you continuation, just like they would if the defense jumps off sides, then that means the risk you run is that the offense can just take a shot downfield.
Free play.
A free play, right? At that point, is it not better just to run 30 guys out there? Like, you don't get penalized anymore per extra player. So the difference between 12 guys and 40 guys out there doesn't make a difference from the 5 seconds that you're going to, or the 5 yards you're going to get penalized. But you would eliminate the potential of a deep shot play taken over the top. So you just run 40 extra guys out there.
It's again.
Doesn't the blending matter though? If you ran 15 guys out there, they could call it.
Well, that's
snap, right?
well, yeah, but
Can they though? That's my question.
To me, it's a pre-snap penalty. To me, this is a pre-snap.
So you're
penalty.
saying that right now the refs just didn't.
The
catch
refs
it
have. Well, you can't break the huddle with 12 guys.
Mm-hmm.
Like so the way the protocol works for the officials is they count, right? You have guys that are designated on the field to count. Well, the minute there are 12 guys and that ball snapped, the whistle should be blown.
So they didn't do that.
They didn't do that. They treated it like an offsides, but the guy that was offsides was not unabated or had a free shot at the quarterback where you let them have a free play.
Yes.
To me, I think the easiest way to do it is a pre-snap penalty.
But so what were they supposed to do in this scenario?
Well, yeah. What happens when you run them on right when the play starts?
That's again, he was out there before the ball was snapped.
We got it. Run it.
Run the clip that we have right here. Let's run it. Look where the center is. Let's play it. Go ahead and play it. So they run him out. Now, I see him. The offensive line ain't even down. There's 12 guys out there. I know because the ref probably already counted 11. Mm-hmm. And then he saw the extra guy run out there. Right, you blow the play dead here.
So
All right, wait, hold on. The ball snapped. Now you blow the play dead.
So you think the referee has counted 12. He knows it's 12. He knows it's going to be a penalty, but they're saying we're just going to let this go.
Hell yeah, because that's what they should have done.
I think he's already counted. Well,
then why did they call the penalty?
Or why would Dan Lanning practice it if he knew it was just going to be a pre-snap penalty?
Wait a minute. They didn't know if it was 12.
That's why I'm saying this thing is layered.
Ryan Day told him on the sidelines it was 12. He went to the refs and said they had 12 on the field after the ball was
But the rule is, even if they recognize there's 12 on the field right now, they don't blow the play dead. It's a free.
But
it's not a dead ball
penalty. With 12 guys.
But you can't break the huddle with 12. That's what I'm saying. The rule they found. That's why loophole's the perfect word. Because they found like a sub rule underneath a rule that's in a. Because to me, it's a pre-snap penalty. So you get the 12, the ball snap, you blow it dead. That's one way you could fix it right there because then you put the clock back on the time at the snap. But the most egregious part was not Dan Lanning putting 12 people on the field. The most egregious part was Ryan Day not realizing that the clock was still going to run because they had an offensive penalty on a play where the clock was running. Ohio State let like 15, 20 seconds run off the clock because they didn't even realize the clock was running. Because there was a penalty, so they thought it stopped. But the penalty was on them. It was offensive pass interference. Because if that wasn't the case, the offense could just have a penalty and stop the clock whenever. You don't even need timeouts. But here's why, Dave, I don't think you run 40 people out there. Because there's two scenarios the way this ends up with you, right? Well, 3, but 2 out of the 3 are very advantageous. Let's say the worst thing that could happen to you happens, and Ohio State hits a big play. You had 12 guys on there. You want to know why Jabbar wasn't in single coverage? Because nobody's really in single coverage. Because you got an extra safety on the field. You can play over the top of 3. You basically can play 3-man. That's what it turns into. But to me, the other 2 scenarios are, 1, the ref doesn't see it,
and
doesn't recognize it, and you're able to play with 12 on a huge play.
Yeah.
Or he does recognize it, like you planned on it, and you know they can't put the time back on the clock. So in 66.6% of the time, it's going to work out great for you. I mean, even if Oh Boy throws an interception right there, and the interception gets called back because of the penalty, they don't get that time back. What would have happened, David? What would have happened if they'd have had 12 on the field and you threw an interception and the guy ran it all the way back and got tackled at the 20 and time expired?
Well, you get an untimed down.
You get an untimed down, but it's from the spot where you were. To me, the ballsiest thing about this and the smartest thing about this that you really got to, if you've ever really been on the sideline, especially coaching special teams, is you have to know exactly the Ohio State kicker's depth that he can kick at from both sides.
Oh, they know.
Because you don't know what side. So that ball was bring the clip of the play back up. Where was this ball at before the 5-yard penalty? We talk about a game. This ball that's at the what? The 44? The 44. So a 5-yard penalty moves it up to the 39. A 56-yard field goal isn't a crazy thing in today's game.
No, that's why I was saying I thought they might kick it before they even got to that last play where Will Howard had to scramble.
But that 5 yards could have put you over the mark where now it's in the kicker's range. But I don't know what the wind is. And every time before a game in that scouting report, you know what that kicker, where his depth is. And even as a special teams guy before the game, when the other special teams unit was out there, my job before our guys got out there was to time the snap, the long snap on the field goal. All right, they're getting it off at this time. Time it on the punt to see if it matches up with what I've got in the game or how big of a difference is. And then how far back is that kicker going? Because it's like batting practice. Some kickers in pregame, They have their routine, but they just want to see how far they can go back and kick one. It's like guys who just want to hit home runs during batting practice. So I need to know going both sides. And then during the middle of the game, if the wind changes, how does that affect the kick? So there is just degrees of opposition research that went into this play, and it is so layered. I think it's the best way to put it. And I want to ask you this, Blaine. Is this like fake injuries to you? I had so many people on the timeline say, well, you guys got after Lane Kiffin for the fake injuries thing, which is a loophole, but you didn't get on Dan Lanning about this. To me, it's about prevalence. Like, this is the first time I've ever seen this. This is the first time I've ever seen this. I've watched fake injuries for the last 5 years.
Yeah, fake injuries just rub me the wrong way. It just doesn't sit well with me like this does. One, I will say this. If you're Dan Lanning and you're running this situation in practice, first of all, who told you about this?
Yeah.
What weird staffer did this happen to in high school, like you brought up, David, that's like, hey, we can look at this late. Trust me, they're going to know how far the field goal kicker can kick if they're running this in simulations. I knew he did this on purpose.
You did. I'll give you credit.
He did this on purpose. You would trade this penalty for that time. Like, and they got to fix it. I don't know how you fix it, but you have to fix it.
Well, I just told you how to fix it.
Every coach is going to do this.
Well, okay, so for the comparison to the fake injuries, I clearly said in the Get Off My Lawn when I did that I don't blame the players because they're listening to the coaches, and I don't blame the coaches for finding a loophole. This is why the leadership of college football has to become leaders and implement certain rules to deter the behavior, because that's something that's been going on. The very first time we see this, the NCAA is already meeting about
That's
it.
what's
Then why
crazy
haven't
to
we
me.
been meeting about fake injuries for the last couple
That's
years?
what's
Again,
crazy
I
to
don't
me.
blame the coaches or the players, but again, this comes down to the crux of what you were saying here. Is it, like, just from a rule standpoint, is this a scenario where the referees caught it late so they had to let the play go, or if they had caught the 12 men before the play, they would have called a pre-snap penalty? Because if the answer is to what you're saying, where no, they saw 12, they're letting the play go just like if it was an offside penalty, then at that point, yeah, I'd run 40 guys out there.
Well, to me, it's not a dead ball. I'm 99.9% sure, and maybe somebody in the chat can correct me or tell me I'm right or whatever. And all I've looked up, and I went back all through the files of coaching, I never remember a play getting blown dead because a 12th guy was run onto the field. I've seen offenses break the huddle with 12 guys and that get called. I've never, and maybe that's why the most genius part about this was running him on late. But I still, if the defense would have had 12 guys out there and 12 guys would have lined up, I think the referee would have counted the 12 and said, all right, that's 12. Let's see if they run a guy off.
Normally
they
you see this when the 12th guy is trying to run off the field,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because he's like, oh, I'm the one too many,
It's
and
a
he's trying to
substitution
run off.
penalty, right?
And so then it becomes a substitution. Doesn't that get blown before the ball snapped? Or
Well, it doesn't, because the reason that like Aaron Rodgers and all these people went fast is to catch you running off the field, and the play counts. The play, whatever happens during the play, still counts. They don't say, "Oh, blow
And
it
that's where
dead."
the fake injuries came from.
Yeah, and like they don't blow the play dead, and they're like, "All right, you caught him." It's just like an offsides. I do not think it's a dead ball. I've never seen it, at least in my mind, unless I've totally lost it. Seen it been called as a dead ball penalty. I don't think it is.
I can't remember a time where it got called as a dead ball penalty either. But it should be.
Well, it should be now.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why he ran him on late. Right? There's a reason for that, because in that saying, you would think if there was 12 out there and they saw 12, they would call it a dead ball, right? They'd call it pre-snap.
No, they wouldn't. That's what I'm saying. It's not a dead ball foul. It's not a dead ball foul. Think about it. When the guys are running off the field, David, because remember the new substitution rule is that it's the offense subs. You've got to wait for the defense to be able to sub back and let those guys run off the field, and they jog and they take their time. When they catch them, it's a free play. You get to finish the play.
Could you turn this into a personal foul?
You can turn it into whatever you want, because what's a personal foul?
Well, I mean, you have to judge intent, right? That's what it comes down to. Like, could you judge the intent on this personal foul that Dan Lanning did that on purpose?
No, you can't. Just like you can't judge intent on a fake injury. You can have a good idea what you thought happened, but you really deep down don't know, and you can't prove it. So to me, you can't make it a personal foul. You can't guess that, oh, they had 12 on the field this time intentionally, and they had a 12 on the field this time unintentionally. No, it's got to be a blanket penalty. It should be a dead ball penalty. All right, when the play is snapped, even if a guy's running off, kill it. Kill it. Because if you're not going to kill it when the guy's running off, you can't kill it when the guy runs on to make it 12. The play should be stopped. Hey, the ball snapped. They snapped it. There's 12 guys on the field on defense. We're blowing it dead. Just like a false start. To me, that's the only way. That's the only way you can do it. Because there's no way to judge intent. We'd have to go through 4 years of court litigation to figure out whether there was intent.
Well, and that is where the comparison to the fake injuries comes to. Because you can't, how are you going to litigate intent in that scenario?
I don't know.
Especially when it comes to injuries. I mean, all I can find is the NFL rule book. When play is stopped, if Team A has more than 11 players in its formation for more than 3 seconds, or Team B has more than 11 players in its formation and the snap is imminent, it is a foul. In these instances, game officials shall blow their whistles immediately. When play is not stopped, if a team has more than 11 players on the field or in the end zone, when a snap, free kick, or fair catch is made and the ball is in play, and it is a foul. I mean, one, that's really convoluted, and two, that's the NFL, not college.
Yeah, I just, even in the NFL, guys, I think we all remember Aaron Rodgers was killing people with this for 2 years because he'd go fast right after a play. The offense wouldn't sub. The defense would sub because they're not used to it, and he'd catch a guy 3 yards off the sideline, and they'd get a free play.
Yep.
Like, it's so, again, I think it can be a pretty cut and dry rule, but this is a genius move.
I want to bring up something that happened in the Oregon game. Did Oregon put one over on Ohio State from the standpoint of they had 12 players on the field, second to last play, and it's only a 5-yard penalty if it's 12 players on the field, and then the clock doesn't reset after the penalty. So time, dripped down off of the clock, and then Ohio State got 5-yard penalty, but you took away 5 seconds on the clock. So did they pull one over on Ohio State?
Here's what I know about defensive coaches. They know every trick in the book. Years ago, Arizona State against UCLA, when I was coaching at UCLA, put 13 guys on the field on a second down and goal from the 7-yard line with 8 seconds left in the first half. Our quarterback couldn't find anybody to throw to, threw it out of bounds. Of course, the penalty, we get half the distance to the goal, but now it's 3 seconds left in the half, and we have to kick the field goal. So they basically got us, and it was 13 guys on the field there. Lanning had called timeout. He saw the bunch. When you play bunches, meaning 3 receivers clumped together, you usually play it in and out with somebody on the point. You're going to be out leveraged on one of those if 2 receivers go in or 2 receivers go out. You're going to have somebody that's going to be in a leverage disadvantage. When you put another player on top of that bunch, that goes away. This was the 12th player. The 5 yards were worth the 5 seconds. Brilliant by Oregon.
Oregon decides to call a timeout to go with 10 seconds left in the game. Ohio State calls a play. Will Howard throws an incompletion, and there's only 6 seconds left on the clock. But, and I have a real big but, on that play where 4 seconds went off the clock, Oregon got penalized for having 12 men on the field. And at the time, and some of you might have saw my live reaction to it, I posted that video on the channel, I was like, what is Oregon doing? How do you send 12 men on the field after a timeout? Well, come to find out, there's a new, I don't want to call it a conspiracy theory, but just a theory going around that Dan Lanning and Oregon did it on purpose. Because they essentially traded 5 yards for 4 seconds, and it turned out in their favor. And everybody's been wondering since that game, man, I wonder if Dan Lanning did that on purpose. He had to do it on purpose, and yada, yada, yada. Well, finally, he was asked about it, and here's what he had to say.
Obviously, it was something that we have worked on, so you can see the result.
Can't help but laugh watching that. You can see the grin and smirk on his face. He's insinuating, yes, we did that on purpose. Although those words didn't come out of his mouth, you know what he's trying to say. Now, if you got to ask me, and by the way, this isn't the end because now the NCAA is getting involved with this, but if you got to ask me my 2 cents on the situation, do I think Dan Lanning did this on purpose? No, I do not. That's just how I feel, and it's close. I'm like 49, 51%. 49%, I do think he did it on purpose. 51%, I don't think he did it on purpose. I don't buy it, and I understand you guys want to believe it because it worked out and you can label a man as a genius. But to me, it looked like the Oregon defense was just straight up confused when they were walking back out there. And if that was the case, and I don't really know the rules on this, but I'm just asking, and maybe some of y'all know this, if it's only 5 yards for having 12 men on the field, wouldn't it be 5 yards if you had 13, 14, 15 men on the field? You see what I'm saying? So at that point in time, why not send out 16 guys? I just don't buy it, but like I said, it's close. I wouldn't be shocked if Dan Lanning did do it on purpose. I'll give you a good analogy and example. It is the equivalent to banking in a 3 in basketball, and everybody's like, did you call bank? And you just shrug your shoulders like Michael Jordan. You're like, hey man, It is what it is. I ain't saying I called bank, but yeah, it went in. There's more to this, though. Take a look at this. The NCAA is examining the rule loophole Oregon used versus Ohio State, intentionally having 12 men on the field. So let's take a look at this. Let me show you what the NCAA is doing about it. After Lanning admitted to the penalty being intentional, the move hasn't sat right with the NCAA or many fans outside of Eugene. The NCAA is trying to figure out a way to ensure the tactic doesn't become commonplace in college football. Quote unquote, Oregon coaches exploited a loophole in the rulebook and it could result in in-season action from the NCAA. Steve Shaw, the NCAA Secretary Rules Editor, told Yahoo Sports, my apologies, on Tuesday that the NCAA Football Playing Rules Committee is actively engaged in examining the play for possible action. The Big Ten officiating crew handled the play appropriately, Shaw said, but the Rules Committee is discussing a way to address the play. So in other terms, to dumb this down, they're saying, yeah, the officiating crew, they did what they're supposed to do, but we don't want to see this happening in the future moving forward, so we might change it this year. Continuing along, and I quote, in the past, the Rules Committee has responded to such fair play incidents with interpretation bulletins released during the season. The bulletins are often meant to be a directive for officials in games in the future. According to Dellinger, the way to enforce a similar situation in the future would be to put time back on the clock to discourage the action in the Oregon-Ohio State game. Any interpretation would likely direct officials to return the game clock to its original time. Okay, so there's that, but let's take a look at some of these comments. Carolina Husker says, it's a loophole and he exploited it. It's called coaching and he knew the rules of the game. Can't be mad at it. Any coach in the nation could have been doing this, but they chose not. Now can you change it? Absolutely, but it's still smart on Dan's part. And I agree, if he did do this intentionally, hey, I clap it up to him, I applaud him. He's a genius. He's playing chess, Rondé's playing checkers. As an OSU fan, the more I sit on this, the more I'm impressed at Lanning's exploitation of this rule. Literally put OSU in an impossible situation. Credit where credit is due, he just bottom line knew how to use the letter of the law to his advantage. I could show you some more comments, but let me go back to why I don't think he did it on purpose. So Ohio State threw an incompletion on that play, it burnt 4 seconds, and they accepted the 5-yard penalty. And you could say Oregon had 12 men out there, so it was harder for Ohio State to move the ball down the field. I get that. But here's what people aren't thinking about because it didn't happen, and it blows my mind. You're just not looking at both sides of it. What if Oregon would have had a pick 6 on the play? What if Oregon would have just intercepted it? What if they would have sacked Will Howard? Guess what? That would have ended the game for him. But since they had 12 men on the field, it wouldn't have. That's why he didn't do it on purpose. And for all the people in the comments saying, man, I can't believe I haven't seen any other coaches do this before. Because it's not smart. And then what about this? On that last play, what if Will Howard throws a quick 5-yard out route and Ohio State's in field goal position to win the game with 1 to 2 seconds left on the clock? That 5-yard penalty actually comes back to bite you in the butt. People are only applauding this and they think it's genius because it worked out. I'm telling you, he didn't do this on purpose. From a logical standpoint, it doesn't make sense as to why you do this on purpose. And you could say it was a quote-unquote calculated risk. And I'm not mad at that.
Mina Kimes, Jen Latta, Martenzie Johnson, Kevin Clark. News of the day from the NCAA, closing the 12-man on the field. Under 2-minute loophole exploited by Dan Lanning in Oregon this weekend in their win over Ohio State. Going forward, the team hurt by the penalty will have the option to have the elapsed time restored, along with taking the penalty yards. So here we go. This was an unusually quick judgment from the NCAA. How should Ohio State feel about that, by the way? How do you think it came to be with Dan Lanning copping to it just yesterday? What are you buying? What are you selling, Jen Latta?
Yeah, I didn't know that the NCAA could move this quickly, to be perfectly honest with you. Ohio State needs to worry about their quarterback's situational and game awareness more than they need to worry about what Dan Lanning is doing. It's not like Lanning was going to go back to this well, guys. It's not like he was going to trot 12 players out there again in a defensive situation to run time off the clock. I like that he admitted to it because he wants people to know that he is one of the up-and-coming, sharpest, genius coaches out there, and this was a way for people to sort of take notice of what he is doing in the Big Ten.
Do you think, though, him admitting it made this happen in some way? If he would have just said, I don't know, maybe it happened, maybe it didn't, the NCAA wouldn't have changed this, Jen?
Yeah, if he doesn't admit it, they probably don't change it, but he wants people to know that he had gone over that rule book and he was aware of a loophole that a lot of other people weren't.
Martenzie.
I'm buying this. I am very much against shenanigans in both my sports and in my hairlines, and I don't like that Oregon took advantage of a loophole to get this. As far as Ohio State, no, they shouldn't feel bad about this. As Jen said, if Will Howard knew how much time was on the clock, then maybe they probably would have won the game. It had nothing to do with that.
Kevin Clark?
As Jen alluded to, the NCAA has been asleep at the wheel on basically every major issue for, 40 years. But their 12th guy goes on the field in the Big Ten game, and all of a sudden there's an emergency meeting about it.
Yeah.
I think this was a fine sort of gray area, intentionally breaking the rules to drain the clock. I'm fine with that. I don't think Lanning should have out and out admitted or hinted that it was something that they've worked on. What I do think is that Ryan Day did a really bad job with situational awareness. This is on him. Ohio State fans should feel bad. They're very angry at Ryan Day because he keeps losing big games. This is another symptom of that. Will Howard didn't get down in time. Ryan Day didn't manage to clock well enough late in that game. So this is a problem for everybody. I don't lay this defeated Oregon at all.
And Kevin, I got to give you credit. You were all over this. Within seconds, I saw that you knew that this is what Lanning was up to with the 12-man penalty. Mina Kimes, to you.
But Buddy Ryan needs to do it.
Yeah, the whole thing is a huge win for Oregon, part because they're going to be the last team to have gotten away with it. And I love that they did it, by the way. But also, Dan Lanning's image will be once again burnished by cleverness. The finest compliment you can get as a coach is to have a rule basically named after you and created for you. Between this and then drilling that kid with the onside kick, he's having a heck of a
mystery as to whether Oregon put 12 men on the field on purpose. Head coach Dan Lanning all but admitted that he purposely added the extra defender while clinging to a 1-point lead over Ohio State with 10 seconds left. In college, this is a live ball foul. The Buckeyes gained 5 yards, but the play shaved 4 seconds off the clock. And on the next play, Ohio State ended up 1 second shy of a game-winning field goal attempt. A similar flag in the NFL helped the Giants beat the Patriots in Super Bowl 46. So the NFL changed the infraction to a dead ball penalty, meaning the game clock gets reset to the time of the snap.
Smart.
The NCAA is already looking at doing the same.
Just do it. Buddy Ryan, I'm not going to say he invented this, but he certainly popularized it, because I can remember, Tony, Buddy once sent 14 people out there. He wanted to make sure the penalty was called, winding the clock down and giving his guys a better chance because they faced fewer snaps with the game on the line. And so the NFL, finally down the line says, get rid of this. College has to do it too.
If you can win within the rules, you win within the
That's
rules.
Right.
The moment of the game for me was when Will Howard slid on the ground, on the turf, and the clock showed 0. that was the moment, because this game came down to what, 6 seconds? I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, and they're in field goal range? Come on,
guys. Can we please? And I don't know that we'll ever get a straight answer out of this. And we may be going down the conspiracy theory path here, but we can talk about the onside kick. Was that planned? Were you trying to kick it into him? Was he trying to just, if it doesn't hit him, then it just, you hit a deep squib. What an incredible momentum change. But if Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoi intentionally got a 12-man on the field penalty, which some people are saying they called timeout, and then decided I'm going to sacrifice 5 yards for 5 seconds or 4 seconds. If that's actually what happened, holy hell, guys.
I know.
Could there be a more brilliant, absolutely incredible, game-changing decision? It was mind blown.
Okay, but it didn't really matter because he threw the out right away and there was no extra coverage over there. They just didn't complete the play. No.
They clouded the coverage to him because he came running onto their sideline, and then you watch the DB, the corner comes up in cloud coverage. So it started to look like an open square out, then turned into throwing an out route against a cloud DB. I'm just saying, I don't know.
We will settle on a poll question as well as we bring in the head coach of the Oregon Ducks, Dan Lanning. Congratulations, Coach. How did you celebrate after the win against Ohio State?
We started recruiting. We had a bunch of kids on campus, so we spent a ton of time with the people that came to see us, and there was a lot of smiles around the building, but it was time to try to figure out a way to help get our team better.
Kind of tricky, though, when you bring in recruits and you have a big game like that. It could go bad, and they're right there to watch, right in front of the home crowd.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, part of what makes Autzen so amazing is our fans, the game day experience. And when you're playing two great teams and things can go different directions, it is about creating that environment and recognizing they can be the difference or they can be a part of what you're building too. So I think players recognize that, and we try to take advantage every moment like that we can.
Yeah, there are places that may have 80, 90,000, 100,000, but I would put 60,000 in Eugene up against 100,000 or 90,000 any place else. All right, let me get the 12-man on the field thing out of the way first, because we brought it up on Monday that we thought you did it intentionally. I didn't hear anything with that because it made sense. But are there two different 12-man on the field penalties, though, that you can incur?
When you say they're two different, tell me what you mean.
Well, let's say somebody's running off the field, or there's a play that's called and 12 guys are on the field. Is there different penalties for those 12 men on the field, if you're aware of that?
Not as I understand it, no.
Okay. So what do you know about it? Like, what was your interpretation of it, and was it on purpose?
I probably spent too much time on this on Monday, and I know what answers we're looking for here, but I got my dancing shoes on this morning, Dan, so I'm not going to get into great depth on strategy.
Wait, why? I thought it was brilliant coaching.
Well, I mean, I think I've paid attention to a lot of situations like that. I always think about the 49ers Ravens Super Bowl, right? And the holding penalty at the end of the game to run the clock out. And I think as defensive coaches, you're always trying to find ways to take advantage of the rules that exist. And we have an unbelievable staff. We spend a lot of time on a lot of different situations. And when things are in place, you want to try to be able to take advantage of them. But I've asked my staff, I've asked our players, hey, Ohio State game, that was awesome. We're on a short week. We got Purdue this week. Let's move on to Purdue. So I'm going to challenge myself to do the same thing. But I expected you to ask about it for sure.
We're going to make 12th man T-shirts. Is that okay?
You're welcome to do whatever you'd like. Dan. You're welcome to do whatever you'd like.
Take a victory lap. I thought it was Belichickian type thing, or, John Harbaugh with the Ravens. That's, Saban-esque. You did something that was pretty smart in that situation. So, okay, we'll move on from it. You don't want to take credit. You don't want to take blame. You don't want to take anything. So, except
I'll say this, Dan. The head coach gets far too much credit when things go right. I didn't play a single snap on Saturday. Not one snap. I wasn't in there at all. So our players, our staff, unbelievable. They do a tremendous job in this place. Makes it really special for us. Our fans were a big part of that game.
Okay, I know. Okay, one more thing. Was there a member of your staff who got a pat on the back for the 12th man on the field? Can we just...
Wait, we were giving out tons of pats on the back after that game. There were a lot of pats on the back and yelling and cheering and some other things my mom probably doesn't want to hear.
Before I let you go, let's go around the room. We'll play the what time did Coach Lanning wake up this morning? Todd, I'll start with you. Exact time when the alarm goes off. He probably doesn't even have an alarm. Todd?
3:45 a.m.
3:45 local time. Seton?
Say 5:15.
5:15.
Sleep in.
Okay. Marvin?
4:30.
All right. Paulie?
5:15. He's already got a lift in and probably some breakfast.
Oh, yeah. He's got
the exact time on the clock is 4:40 a.m.
I was going to do 4:47 this morning. What time did Coach Lanning wake up?
All right, you just revealed me here. I'm super guilty. I'm the guy that has a lot of.
Oh my God!
Yeah, I've got a problem. So and the way you do anything is the way you do everything. I've got a problem when it comes I know that I have to get up, and then I know when I want my body to start waking up. So I'm the snooze button guy, and that's bad. I know that's bad. So I start my alarms at 4:30, but when I actually get out of the bed, it's probably 4:50, 4:55, 5. It's never the first one. It's that's my all right. This is the get out of the zone one. So I'm a little disappointed.
Coach, you had about 15 alarms set there.
I have a lot of alarms set. And then my wife, she gets kind of frustrated with that. You can imagine how annoying that might be. But it's just the sacrifices she makes. And then every once in a while, I'll be like, Sophia, I need you to set this one because this is the one. Like, I have to be up at this time. Do not let me sleep past 5:15. Don't let me sleep past 5:20. We were up just a little bit before 5 this morning.
Congrats on the win and safe travels to Purdue. Thank you, Coach.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
Incredible day in Eugene, Oregon. We have a Duck W and Ohio State Buckeye tears. My life cannot be going any better.
The fact that we were out there storming the field, Coach Lanning just chest bumping and he's yelling for the fucking boys. Chevy Silverado, thank you so much. What an incredible time. What you do best, big hugs, tiny kisses once again.